Really, it's almost too picturesque to be true. Too picturesque to be profitable, I should think. Those fields look decidedly neglected. I wonder at the local agricultural committee— Oh, don't be so prosaic, Frank. I want to see more of this lovely place. Do you think they'd give us tea if we asked very nicely? You bet they'll give us tea. This place is a snare for the unwary tourist. Frank Protheroe and his wife Eleanor stood looking down over the full extent of Valley Farm. Its whitewashed walls, sagging thatched roof, mellow brick chimneys. It might have been a picture postcard of the English countryside. They'd never had a proper honeymoon. Frank had always been too busy at work, trying to build up the business. This trip to Devon was the first real holiday they'd had. But, as Frank surmised, the farm itself had fallen into disrepair, and the whole place now seemed directed towards the tourist industry. Mrs. Broadman, farmhouse teas with genuine Devonshire cream, was written on a sign hanging outside the house. Indeed, they had some difficulty in finding a space to park their car among those that were already established in the car park picturesquely concealed behind the barn. The tea-room itself was a large room that had evidently been hastily tacked on to the house in an approximation of the original Tudor style. It was crowded, and Frank and Eleanor had to share their table with two men. One of them, an elderly man with a strained expression and bright, hard eyes, Pettigrew was sure he had seen before, but where he could not remember. The other was a complete stranger. The room was plentifully decorated with rustic objects in pottery and beaten metalwork. The whole place struck Pettigrew as thoroughly bogus, but his wife was in a mood to be pleased. She remained serene even when a loud crash behind the kitchen door, and a harassed waitress appearing to say that there had been an accident with the tray and that their tea would be delayed, did not worry her. "Do you think any of these pottery figures are for sale?" "All of them, I'm sure. This place is very efficiently run, while the farm is scandalously neglected. I'd like to have a word with the farmer." "Much good would that do you?" said the man whom Pettigrew had not seen before. He tapped his forehead with his forefinger and went on. "Harry Broadman don't talk to anybody but his missus, not since he cracked his head motor racing 30 years ago. I've seen him moving about the farm or sitting in his back room, but he won't speak. Just so long as everything is the same, day after day, he's as quiet as a lamb. But she tells me that if anything changes, he goes wild. She never lets him know what she does at this end of the house. She keeps him and pays the rent out of it." "I see. I owe them both an apology, then. Mrs. Broadman must be a very brave woman." "You must buy me one of her china dogs, just to make amends." "You'll be throwing your money away," said the man with a familiar face. "They're all supplied by the junk shops in the local town, sold on commission. There are no genuine farmhouse antiques left in the county. I ought to know. I've been through 'em with a fine tooth comb. It's heartbreaking." Pettigrew smiled cynically. "When I was an undergraduate, I stayed at a farm near here. The farmer told me that a gentleman from Barnstaple had given him £17 for a bit of old wood off the wall. It's in the South Kensington Museum now, a unique piece of 16th century panelling." £17 for something that must be worth hundreds? What a miserable swindle! "Not at all. The man from Barnstaple simply applied his superior knowledge. He was entitled to do it, as any collector is entitled to do. It's his only asset." He spoke with the violence of a fanatic, and in that moment Pettigrew remembered all about him. "Your name is Shaw, isn't it? I saw you giving evidence in a case about antiques once. Let me see, your speciality was early salt-glaze ware." But they were interrupted by the reappearance of a waitress, who staggered up to the table and dumped a tray in front of them. "I'm sorry about the teapot. We're that short with breakages. I had to give you this. It does dribble a bit, I'm afraid." 20 minutes later, the Pettigrews were finishing their tea. Shaw, who had paid his bill some time before, was still lingering at the table, smoking a succession of cigarettes. Mrs. Broadman, the thin, harassed woman, came up to them. "Would you care to buy a little souvenir? A china dog, perhaps? Pettigrew obediently bought a china dog. Then Shaw remarked casually, "I rather like that teapot. It's so different from the others." "Oh, dear." The woman was evidently upset. "Mary had no call to take that out of the cupboard. It's the master's. He'll be expecting to have his tea out of it directly. Do you mind if I take it now?" "Not at all. We've quite finished." Shaw followed the teapot with his eyes, and there was a look of sheer animal hunger in his face. He sat for a moment, and then, muttering, "This is ridiculous," went hastily from the room. "I'm no expert, darling, but there was a photograph in the papers the other day of a teapot that fetched a record price for salt glazeware at Christie's. This one looks the dead spit of it. I wonder what happens next." What happened next that was an empty-handed Mr. Shaw got into an old-fashioned green saloon just in front of a Pettigrew's car and drove away faster than was safe in the narrow Devon lanes. "I feel that Mrs. Broadman should be warned," said Pettigrew to his wife next morning. "But why? She doesn't want to sell the teapot, so that means he'd have to offer her a very good price if he wants it. I'm not so much troubled by the question of price, though of course Shaw will try to cheat her if he can. I'm more anxious what will happen if she refuses to sell. You see, Shaw isn't quite sane where his speciality is concerned, and to get a really fine specimen, I think he'd do anything, you know. Anything." Eleanor needed the car for a shopping trip that morning, so Pettigrew took a leisurely bus which deposited him 1/2 a mile from Valley Farm. He'd reached the last bend in the lane when he had to flatten himself against the hedge to avoid being run down by an old green saloon travelling much too fast. With a sense of foreboding, he quickened his pace. The farmhouse door stood open, and there was no answer to his urgent ringing of the bell. The hall was silent, except for the ticking of a long-case clock. The door into the kitchen was ajar, and something dark was spreading slowly beneath it over the clean, flagged floor. Pettigrew avoided it carefully as he pushed the door open and looked in. Mrs. Broadman was lying on her kitchen floor, face downwards. The back of her head had been battered in with appalling violence. A glass-fronted cupboard at the end of the room was open. It was crowded with crockery of all sorts, and there was a rather conspicuous gap in the middle of the bottom shelf. Pettigrew looked round the room. One other thing he noticed before he turned to go for help was a small folded piece of paper on the floor. It turned out to be a £5 note, with the name of a local hotel stamped on the back. It did not take Pettigrew very long to establish that he was the only living person in the place, and that the house was not on the telephone. It took him considerably longer to make contact with the outside world. Eventually he was able to stop a passing motorist, who took him to the local police headquarters. There he was thankful to hand matters over to an alert young detective sergeant, to whom he gave the £5 note, together with all the information in his possession. The sergeant promised to keep him informed of the investigation, and he was as good as his word, for late that evening Pettigrew was called to the telephone at the inn where he and Eleanor were staying. "That was Shaw's favour, all right. He cashed a cheque at his hotel last night. He'd not been seen there since 10 o'clock this morning. We've got the number of his car from them, and it's being circulated. That's all we can do at present." "It's a bad business." "It is." The next evening Pettigrew was summoned again from the parlour, but this time the sergeant called in person. "There are 1 or 2 points in your statement I'd like to clear up." Pettigrew dealt with them, and the sergeant thanked him politely. "I don't expect we'll be troubling you again. The case is cleared up. We found Shaw and his car." Oh, thank heaven for that. Gave me the cold shivers to think of that man being at large. But of course he was mad. Quite mad, sir. I do wonder, though, whether he was mad for the purposes of criminal law. "Oh, I'm not a lawyer, sir, but I don't think any jury in these parts would say he was anything but mad." "These parts? The trial wouldn't be here. You're not saying Shaw was a local man?" "I'm not talking about Shaw, sir. He's dead. We found him in his car in the old quarry pit near the farm, under 10 feet of water. That's where Harry Broadman put them. Harry can't stand changes, you see, large or small. He just went off the handle when he found his wife selling that precious teapot of his to Shaw for a couple of fivers. We found the other one underneath his body, by the way. He's the simple type that doesn't know his own strength, doesn't know anything much. Doctor says he'll be unfit to plead, and it'll be Her Majesty's pleasure for him, poor chap. I only hope it won't be the Lord's pleasure that keeps him long in this world, for he ain't happy here, sir. He ain't happy here. Amen to that. While Eleanor finished her coffee in the lounge, Pettigrew went up to their room and pulled his suitcase down from the rack. Inside, buried under some shirts, was a brown paper bag. He unwrapped it and gazed a moment at the salt-glazed teapot with the dribbly spout that had caused so much trouble. He smiled and put it back. It had been sitting on the kitchen table, put there, no doubt, while Shaw did his deal with Mrs. Broadman. Assuming Shaw to be the murderer, he'd been surprised he'd left it. But now he understood, of course. Harry Broadman had put pay to Shaw's plans as permanently as he had put pay to his own wife. At least something good has come out of it. A nice holiday, I think. Not Devon, somewhere abroad, somewhere hot. That honeymoon Eleanor has always wanted.